I just want to welcome everybody. My name is Cynthia Chandler. I'm the Associate Dean at Block Career Development, for folks who don't know me. And we're really excited this year to be able to bring representatives from all the different branches of JAG to be here today. We have one esteemed speaker appearing via conference phone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful, that's great. So if we get to a point where folks can ask questions, I want to ask you to project your voice well so that everyone can hear, including people, a person like who's appearing remotely. And I'm going to leave it to you all to introduce yourselves, and thank you so much for coming.
I can start. My name is Lieutenant Christy Hagedorn. Originally grew up in Indiana and was there for most of my life. Went to school, undergrad at Purdue, played some soccer there, and then went to Indiana University for law school. Had no idea about the JAG Corps in my third year of law school, where I was just talking to a mentor who just happened to be in the Army Reserve JAG. And talking to him, initially I was like, well, I don't want to get shot. And then I realized what the JAG Corps was, at least in the Navy, after a while, and thought it was just a great opportunity. So I applied in the fall of my 3L year, got a no the first time around. I actually applied for all the services. Applied again in the spring and got picked up. So on that point, I would say, if you don't get picked up the first time, go ahead and apply the second time, because it is, I know more than a few JAGs who got picked up the second time around. After that, graduated in May, took the bar in July. I was actually waitlisted from the spring board, and so I took a law firm job in Indiana, and found out about a month later that I got picked up off the waitlist for the Navy JAG Corps. And so I said, sorry, law firm, I gotta go, serve my country. That was about, I think, in August after I graduated law school. In September, so about a month later, I was already in officer development school, which for the Navy is a 5-week course. It includes all of this stuff. I guess I'm going to do kind of everything. I should just introduce myself. I'll just introduce myself and then go into the Navy stuff later. Okay, that's me. I'm 4 years into the Navy. I love it, but I'll talk more about the process later. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Lieutenant Amanda Gavlik. I am with the United States Coast Guard. My story is actually very similar to hers. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. I went to University of Miami for both undergrad and for law school. I also didn't know about Coast Guard JAG until my 3L year of law school. It's pretty much when you have to decide what you want to do as an adult. And so I interned actually at the District 7 Coast Guard legal office. And then I had some very wonderful mentors there who kind of, introduced me to the program, gave me the ins and outs and pretty much what I could expect from there on out. That was my spring of my 3L year. So the Coast Guard will accept applications when you're still in law school, but they prefer to basically that it be completed. So even though you can apply as a 3L, your application won't be put up to a board until you actually have a completed application. So it didn't really matter when I applied, so I graduated, I took the bar, and then after I took the bar in July, I applied that September. That's pretty much when my application went up. And then I also did get rejected the first time around. Coast Guard is very small, so it's just kind of by nature very selective. But I did make it the next panel. So I got rejected the winter panel, but got picked up in the spring panel. So again, it's not really something to be discouraged about. It's kind of par for the course, actually. My recruiter even told me so. So, all good things, come to those who wait. So I got in the spring, and then I began my Coast Guard career that July. And now I'm here, so I'm a first tour judge advocate, and I'm in Alameda, just across the bay.
Captain Lickfar, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. My name is Captain Vinny Lickfar. I am an Army judge advocate. I'm currently stationed in Fort Carson, Colorado. I'm speaking to you guys from Colorado Springs. I went to the University of Arizona for undergrad and then the University of Pittsburgh for law school. I applied to several JAG Corps my 3L year. I got accepted into the Army JAG Corps out of law school. I took past the bar the following summer out of law school and joined the Army JAG Corps about 6 to 8 months later, and I've been in since, and I'm going on my 5th year as an Army Judge Advocate.
All right, I'm First Lieutenant Jolnak. I'm actually relatively new. I took a bit of a different path to get into the Air Force. I actually started a first career as an IT project manager in Michigan. And then when the auto industry went south, I lost my job, and that was sort of my incentive to go back to law school. Law school is something I'd always considered and hadn't quite done it. So I worked full-time while going to law school. In the nights and weekends, I went to Cooley in Michigan. And then after law school, after I graduated law school, I actually clerked at the Michigan Supreme Court for 2 years. And then the judge I was working for was retiring, and my clerkship ended. And so I applied to the Air Force JAG Corps. My best friends in the Air Force, my parents were both in the Air Force during the Vietnam era, so the Air Force was where I wanted to be. And I was lucky enough to get accepted in the October boards on my first try. And then worked my way through the process, and I actually left at the end of March to begin my commissioned officer's training. So I kind of meandered my way here. But I will tell you, I just got back from what's our JAG school. We call it JSOC, Judge Advocate Staff Officer course. So I was at my base 2 months before that, and now I've been back for about another month since that. And I can tell you as a newbie that I absolutely love it. It's a lot of fun.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Major John Paul Wheatcroft, United States Marine Corps, Judge Advocate in the reserves currently. I did serve 8 years active duty. I went to University of Michigan for undergrad, American University in DC for law school, and joined in my 3rd year, like the women here on the panel. Though the Marine Corps, you can actually join as a 1L, very distinct. You can do it any year of your law school career, and then you can also join as a full barred attorney. And the service is great. I think all our experiences, we're opening to questions, and we'll gladly tell you what we've gone through to get to the process. But as a judge advocate in the military, you'll do a lot of different legal work, and you'll get a lot of great legal experience, all while serving your country. You'll have a great resume of clients and cases that you've worked on at the end of the day, and it really gives you a good focus if you decide to leave any of these branches of the military, what type of law you would like to practice down the road, and what type of law you're good at and what you don't like. So at that, we'll turn it over to you, or questions, or I don't know exactly what you
Well, maybe y'all could talk a little bit about what it means to be in the JAG Corps. What does it mean for your different divisions of service, and then what the work is that you do.
So I think what it means is probably pretty personal to everyone. For me, what drew me to the services was service to country. Obviously, that's probably top for most people. But really, it was a teamwork aspect. I had an athletic background growing up. I lost a little bit of that in law school. Kind of that feeling of cohesiveness, and really found it in at least the Navy JAG Corps. And I think all the services provide that to some extent or another. The Navy JAG Corps is relatively small. We have about 850 attorneys, so it's a big law firm, but it's worldwide. And so what I really love about it is the team aspect. I can call Rhoda right now and speak to a JAG who's never heard of me and say, hey, I'm stationed in San Diego, I have a question about, this trial I have coming up. And, they'll help you no matter what. It's 850 other officers who are very much in the same community as you. And so it's a really cool feeling. Other than that, like the major had said, it's diversity, right? I mean, you're traveling to all different places, you're doing all different sorts of work, kind of leading into the second question. For me, in my short period of time, I still consider myself a newbie, right? I'm still a junior officer, which is great. I have some responsibility, but I still get to have a lot of fun, right, with all the junior officers. It's great. So in my 4 short years, I've been a defense counsel, been a prosecutor for about 2 years out of that 4 years. I've done legal assistance work, so that's writing wills and dealing with kind of anything that a sailor or Marine walks in with, like, hey, my landlord is giving me a hard time, can you call him on my behalf? So that's legal assistance. And then command services as well, advising aircraft carrier commanders on what they can and can't do legally and ethically. And that's a whole range of issues just for the ships and aircraft. I was in Lemoore for a few months this summer advising some of the F-18 commanders on, again, what they can and can't do. So it's just really fun, cool work. And if you get sick of one type of work, so I've been in trial as a prosecutor for about 16 months down in San Diego working in the Special Victims Unit, so sex assaults and child abuse cases. I got sick of that after a while, right? After about 16 months. So I raised my hand and said, hey, send me to do another job for a couple of months. And they did, right? So that's when I went up to Lemoore, granted in the middle of nowhere. But it was pretty cool with the F-18. So you get to do a whole range of jobs, and at least the Navy is very flexible in terms of accommodating what you'd like to do specifically.
I think for me, joining the Coast Guard, it was all about opportunity. The Coast Guard is not a JAG Corps like the other services, except the Marines. But basically, what that means is I'm an officer first, and I'm a legal specialist second. So essentially, my primary duty is legal. I am a legal officer, currently in a legal billet. But once my contract is up now, I can actually transfer out of legal and do an out-of-specialty tour. So that to me was very appealing. I think that the Coast Guard has such a wide array of domestic, types of law that are really important, especially international, maritime, operational. Those are kinds of like the things that draw people to the Coast Guard. And actually, that's what drew me to the Coast Guard. Working at a district legal office, that's pretty much where you see a lot of that stuff. You're going to be doing command advice, like Lieutenant was talking about, but you're also going to be doing, stuff regarding migrant fishing vessels and stuff about cocaine smuggling submarines. So you're going to be doing such a wide array of stuff, and honestly, to be an officer in the Coast Guard, maybe not in legal, but just an officer in an operational unit is such a great opportunity, especially with a legal background. So to me, that's what drew me to the Coast Guard, and I think that opportunity to not necessarily be a lawyer, but just draw from your legal experiences is a great way to continue on in the Coast Guard career. Captain, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll just use this time to kind of do like the Army pitch and what drew me to it, and then I guess some of the experiences that I've had, which is similar than what my colleagues have already discussed. But the Army is the largest JAG Corps, so we cover a wide range of different types of law. So I guess what drew me was being the ability to try different types of law. So obviously the Army is the largest force in the United States, so we do a lot of administrative law, handle a lot of administrative things from fiscal law issues to ethical law issues. And then of course, the big, I guess you would say, to a lot of people, the sexier type of law is military justice. So since I've been in about 5 years, I spent most of my time in military justice. And this is, I did a lot of court and law school, loved it, wanted to be in the courtroom, and I saw the JAG Corps as an opportunity to get into the courtroom with big cases, with lots of responsibility, much faster than you might otherwise get at some other places. And that has absolutely been my experience. I've been a prosecutor for the last 2 years, and I'm currently sitting in a defense spot, and many felony cases, everything from handling I've handled my own murder cases up through rape, through child crimes. Obviously sexual assault is a big thing in the military right now, so a lot of experience in that. So and just really my first 5 years of being an attorney, the amount of experience I've had in the courtroom and the responsibility is really second to hardly anyone or any other work experience I felt like I could get anywhere. With regards to uniforms, there's nothing on my everyday uniform that signifies that I'm an attorney. So when I put on my uniform every day and come on to the Army post, I'm an officer, and I love, and I'm a leader, and I lead paralegals. I'll never be asked, hopefully knock on wood, to be asked to lead an infantry unit at the front lines, of course, because I'm an attorney, but definitely being an officer and being a leader and having expectations and leadership roles is part of the job, which is something that attracted me to the Army JAG Corps. We do a lot of international law and things like that. I will tell you, having deployed to a joint environment with Marine Judge Advocates, with Navy Judge Advocates, with Air Force Judge Advocates, that there are some differences, of course, but they're all very similar and it appeared that my colleagues in the other branches were getting very similar experiences to my own. Obviously different locations for the posts and things like that, but I will tell you that in the Army, I would say that as we are officers, we're expected to be officers. Again, we don't wear some sort of any sort of emblem that puts us apart from anyone else. And some people may think that, oh, well, you're in the Army or you're in the Navy, but you're just a lawyer. But I'll tell you, I've been deployed to Afghanistan, sitting around a table with the generals or higher-ranking commanders and advising commanders on important issues. I'll tell you that really nothing's more important to them than what the lawyer says, whether it's because they want to keep their name out of the paper or just make sure that, they don't want to be tried for whatever reason later, that our rules are significant, they're looked upon as significant, and I very much love everything that I've been able to do and the experience I've gotten in a very short career.
Okay, I guess why I joined up, I had the sort of background and some experiences in the military because of my friend and my parents, and it's like a big club. We're all friends, we're all on the same team, we all work together. And then I almost feel like the JAG Corps, in a sense, is a smaller club within that club. How close we are and how well we work together, the others have spoken about that, it is very true. We usually have PT on Friday mornings, and we usually go out and play some sort of sports games. And we invite the Defense Council out, and we invite the Special Victims Council out, and the other JAG lawyers on base, and we get out there, we're all friends. We all know each other. There really isn't any animosity there or anything, and the people who tend to play the games and are dirty lawyers or whatnot, those types of things, pull the dirty tricks, lose their reputation real quick. So I really like that sense of teamwork and that sense of belonging. And I guess to give you an idea of, since I'm brand new, I can give you an idea of the types of things that will happen right away once you get in, especially, particularly for the Air Force. So in the Air Force, when you come in, you're usually, for your first 2 assignments, you're at base legal office. And that means you will be doing courts martials, so you'll be prosecuting courts martials, but in addition, you're usually assigned one other job. Specifically, I'm Chief of Operations Law, so I deal with all the operational law involving the base. But when I had a 2-month period before I went to the JAG school, when I got to the base, and I was instantly doing legal reviews on legal issues on base. I ran into an issue where we needed to figure out if something fell under fair use in patent law. So I did a legal review on that, and I got to work with the patent law attorneys in DC that work for the Air Force that are civilians, and come to a determination on that. And they tried to get me into a court, but for whatever reason, there were 3 I was scheduled for, didn't quite get into any because they all got delayed before I left for school. But as soon as I got back, I came back to 3 courts that I'm on, and I'm about to be put on a 4th. On my 2nd night back from JAG school, I was the on-call JAG, and I got to advise federal agents. Our OSI agents are like the FBI, but for the Air Force, they're federal law enforcement. I got to advise them on a major drug bust that is going to lead to federal charges for a civilian on base and a court-martial for a military member on base, involving a lot of marijuana. I've been to several different meetings with commanders where I've been advising them on the legal aspects, and then one of the last things I'm tasked with is creating a disaster plan with primarily dealing with the legal aspects of support of civil services, military support in the event of a disaster, natural, man-made, whatnot. So there are a bunch of legal steps that you have to go through in order to make that legal, and I'm creating basically a walkthrough so that when it happens, we can just go down a checklist and make sure everything is there, as opposed to running around trying to figure out what to do next. So those are the things I've been tasked with already. I've been back for just about a month, and there's more coming. So it definitely comes quick and heavy. And then in addition to that, I've done legal assistance. So I've drafted wills. I've advised people on landlord, tenant, divorce, child custody. All that stuff comes at you real quick, and so you get a huge, diverse sort of experience right away, and it's a lot of fun. You don't get bored.
piggyback off of that, the reason I joined, it was to look for that diversity of experience in the law. And the Marine Corps, what it'll do is, as a first tour judge advocate, you serve 8 years. 4 of those years have to be on active duty. So the first 4 years, the Marine Corps does its best to get you into 3 legal offices. And I look forward to that difference, that change and growth in each office. So you start in the trial shop, you'll do either defense or prosecution, and you have a lot of say as to where you want to go if you prefer one over the other. After doing trials, you'll then move to legal assistance, as everyone's experienced a little bit of that. Legal assistance, you're doing wills, divorces. Unfortunately, a lot of Marines are getting divorced. So you're doing a lot of child custody agreements between spouses, as well as settlement agreements to figure out what happens with all the property. You're also doing consumer law issues with legal assistance, as my colleagues have mentioned. But then after doing that for about a year, the Marine Corps will rotate you into civ law. Civ law is where you are advising the commanders of the base that you're on, and you're advising them on a myriad of different issues. At Pendleton, when I was there, I was doing, besides ethical opinions, but water rights issues, environmental law issues that are pertinent to that base. As a civil law attorney, you also serve as the AUSA, the Assistant United States Attorney. So you actually will go and litigate cases for civilians who are aboard that military installation. If they commit a crime there, those crimes are going to be prosecuted, so you'd be responsible for prosecuting those crimes in federal court. This one was in San Diego. And then at the end of that tour, you get a really good understanding of what law you like to practice and what you don't. The other main thing the reason I joined the Marine Corps versus the other services is I wanted to really get a sound military experience. So the Marine Corps, like the Coast Guard, is very unique in that you are a Marine officer first, a judge advocate second. So you will have to, as a Marine, go through all the same steps that an infantry officer goes through, a public affairs officer goes through, a combat engineer, communications officer, doesn't matter, man or woman, doesn't matter your role, everyone has to go through 10 weeks of officer candidate school and then 6 months of the basic school where you're firing every weapon the Marine Corps has, you're doing platoon tactics in the defense and the offense, you're setting up perimeters, you're doing patrolling, you're doing combat operations essentially. And individually you have to do that. So for a lot of people, and a lot of students like yourselves in the audience, you may not find that enticing. You might not want that experience because you will have to do it and succeed at that before you go on to the Naval Justice School. So to me, I look forward to that. I wanted to serve and have that experience, and the Marine Corps offers it to you. The benefit of that, as Amanda mentioned, is that you don't have to remain your entire career as a lawyer in the Marine Corps. Because you've already been trained like every other officer in the Marine Corps, you can actually leave and do other things within the Marine Corps. So you can go and work at an embassy overseas as a foreign area officer. You can go on Capitol Hill and be a liaison to the Senate and House of Representatives as a, basically part of a team of Marines that go and do briefings on Capitol Hill, advise senators and congressmen, do different. You can actually go and work and do security and be a safety officer on any base. So there are a lot, and that's just a very small amount that I'm thinking right now off the top of my head, but each one of us will have monitors. We all have individuals within our organizations that will give you a list of all the jobs that you can hold as a lawyer, and for the Marine Corps as a non-lawyer, and you're open to apply for and select any of those jobs. So you're not just limited to the lawyer column. However, if you want to stay your entire career just as a judge advocate, you're more than welcome to. The Marine Corps won't force you to leave the law, but it's available for you. So that's a difference that the Marine Corps has than the other services, except for the Coast Guard.
And I just forgot to mention, also, I think my colleagues explained kind of what your first foray into the JAG Corps, and just the JAG for us, but for the Coast Guard, the way it's going now, just if you guys have followed the news in the military, sexual assault obviously is a big deal. I know Captain talked about it. But basically, our military justice shops have been increasing in number. So just to put into perspective, the Coast Guard is the smallest service represented. So our uniformed JAG members are under 200. We're about 195. So we're a pretty small organization, so it's even more likely that if you call someone up in DC, they're going to know who you are, even if it's just by name. So you kind of have that extreme family feeling in the Coast Guard. And for your first tour, you're going to end up in one of three places generally. It'll be either the Legal Service Command, which is very military justice heavy, but you will also be doing like ethics opinions and command advice. And then you could end up in a district legal office, which is kind of what I was talking about before, where you'll have like the migrant issues, the international law issues, and you'll still be doing command advice, but it'll just be a completely different type of law that you'll be working with on a whole. Or you could end up in headquarters. It's the Office of General Law. It's pretty small, not many lawyers go there, but it's basically like big picture policy. So if you guys like reading statutes and all that kind of stuff, it's a great place to go. But the Coast Guard does try, like all the other services, to get you into different shops also. So we don't have like a first tour judge advocate program. I think the Navy just rolled that out now. But what we do is usually your first 2 years will be where your billet says you are. So for example, my colleagues that are in the Legal Service Command, they will be there for at least the first 2 years. And then they'll try to rotate them into either a district legal office, an area legal office, or just something else, just to kind of get them into a different shop. Our defense services are really small. We actually have the Navy doing most all of our defense cases, but you can actually be stationed at a DSO alongside the Navy to do defense services if you want. So there's a lot of opportunity really even in your first tour, just like all the other services, to get a very broad range of legal experience. So I didn't want to leave that out. I kind of forgot about it at first. But yeah, just so you know, like we do also have that kind of broad spectrum for your first tour.
I'm wondering if any of you have any helpful hints or suggestions for people who are applying in terms of what criteria is looked at, what you would want to emphasize as an applicant.
So I can speak for the Navy at the very least, and it's probably the same for the defense services, but the Navy in particular looks at the whole person. So we're looking for a very diverse background. So you don't necessarily have to, and very much it's the case where we don't pick people from the Ivy League schools with the top grades. That is not generally the person we're looking for. We're looking for a whole person, a very diverse person, meaning you could have traveled a lot growing up, or you could have gone to multiple schools, East, West Coast, just a very diverse background. So we look at the whole person during our application process. So you'll submit an application that includes the LSAT scores, your grades, where you go to law school, things like that. But then we have an interview process. So yesterday I interviewed 6 candidates at the Navy Recruiting District in San Francisco, and they were applying for the October board. So you'll go through an interview. It's an hour long. Usually it encompasses 6 standard questions that we ask every applicant. It's a structured interview. So you won't know the questions ahead of time. They're just basically questions that we ask you to kind of gauge your process of thinking, and we also look at your resume during that interview as well. And so it's the application, it's the interview, and any other documents that you submit, and that goes in front of a board, one in October and then one in the spring, so you can apply twice. You generally only do 1 interview though, so if you do an interview in the fall, that will be the same interview that they use for your spring board if for some reason you don't get picked up in the fall. So you don't have to go through 2 interview processes. So that's the application process. In terms of tips, I would say, I can't say it enough, diversity, right? So get letters of recommendation from all different sorts of people, not just law professors. If you had a college professor or a high school basketball coach or whoever who can talk about the different aspects, so you're hitting kind of your whole life experience. That's what the Navy is looking for. So I would say, try and get letters of recommendation from all sorts of people. It's not necessarily like, I'm going to take Admiralty Law in law school, right, so it's a guaranteed in. We don't really look at that sort of thing. It's really just diversity.
Yeah, I agree. Diversity is kind of like the big picture, because you don't want to keep hiring the same person over and over again. So I think for the Coast Guard, and any service really, it's just you have to be genuine. For me, actually for every applicant, the very first question they're generally going to ask you is, why do you want to join the Coast Guard? Like, why does the Coast Guard have your attention as opposed to the other services? And I think that was really where I kind of had my bread and butter, because I didn't apply to any of the other services, not because I didn't feel like they were worthy, it's just because I had already made up my mind that that was the career path I wanted to take. So for me, that was kind of like my in with my interview. And it's the same pretty much application process. You go to a recruiting office, and it's called a direct commission lawyer package. Basically what that means is you're going to be, if you are accepted, you will be a direct commission officer. So you're not going to go through the officer candidate school like everybody else has to do. And the way that Coast Guard works is you're on a reserve commission. So you're basically, to become a fully integrated officer, you have to promote up one more level. So I would have to promote up to lieutenant commander and then be full-time active duty. But basically you're going to fill out the whole application, your law school, extracurricular activities, your grades, your pretty much everything. The letters of recommendation are, I think, huge. I had 3 different ones. I had one law professor, one who from the law firm I worked at, and then I also had one from the staff judge advocate at the district legal office that I worked for. And having a captain sign your letter of rec I thought was a pretty big deal, and I think it helped, because it shows that you actually already have kind of like that experience in the respective service. So kind of following with my advice is, if you really are serious about a specific branch, really get with somebody who's gone through the process and you can basically pick their brain. I was very lucky that when I was at the district legal office, I had 2 people there who were willing to mentor me and basically give me the advice. Like, when you go to your interview, make sure you do this, that, and the other thing. When you're writing your essays, make sure you do this, that, and the other thing. They didn't do the application for me, but they gave me that helpful insight into, what helped them get in, and then what they're seeing in the trends now in hiring. So I think that's really that's I think the most important thing if you're really serious about a specific branch. And I think it can apply to all the branches. Get with someone who can really give you that personal advice. And then after you submit your application, you're going to go in front of a 3-person interview panel. One of those people has to be a lawyer. The other 2 don't have to be lawyers. They just have to be an officer of the grade that you will be coming into as or higher. So as a Coast Guard JAG, you come in at an 03, a lieutenant. So all the officers on my panel had to be either lieutenants or above, with one being a lawyer. So I had 1 lawyer on my panel and 2 operational officers. So, and that, honestly, the interview is the most important part for the Coast Guard of the application process. Captain, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that the best word by far to describe what all the branches are looking for, and I know for a fact the Army is looking for, is diversity. I think that my colleagues hit the nail on the head with diversity. I think that everybody needs to understand that the purpose of the JAG Corps for all the branches sitting at the table, the main purpose, the real reason why the JAG Corps was created is because we advise commanders. That's what we do. We advise commanders. The Armed Forces' job is to fight and win America's war, and our job within that mission is to advise commanders and helping them to do so. Now, with that being said, I was a prosecutor for 2 years, and that put me in the courtroom to prosecute people not unlike any other federal courtroom in the country. However, I'm prosecuting a commander's soldier. So I'm sitting down with that commander, talking to him, advising him, hey, this is what I think you should be charged with, this is what I think we should go forward with or not charged with. So that's our role. And I think that everybody needs to understand that the Armed Forces is probably the most diverse entity in the world. One of the greatest things about being a judge advocate is not just the JAG Corps, but in the Army or in any force, armed forces, I've met people from every type of background imaginable. Just in the JAG Corps, every type of law school, from different countries from around the world. And so the Army itself and the Armed Forces, I don't want to speak too much for everyone else, but I believe the Armed Forces in general is so extremely diverse. And because our job is to represent or give legal advice to a diverse group, the JAG Corps is looking for diverse lawyers, not the Harvard lawyers, not people who are just getting straight A's, not people who are just on law review, but people who have a diverse experience and come from diverse backgrounds. So with regard to the Army, our application is due November 1st, and it's a board made up of several officers, and people always ask me, well, what's important to them in the application? And I've interviewed these people that sit on these boards that select who comes to the Army JAG Corps, and I get a different response from everyone, which tells me that you have to be diverse and not focus on one area. So straight A's, great, but what else? Is that it? So it's because the different people picking who gets in or out like different things, I think it's good to be the best you can across the board, not necessarily a specialist in any one unique area. So that's very important to us. Once you get in the JAG Corps, we have a 10-week course that you go to where you learn how to become an Army Judge Advocate. You learn about the Army, learn to be a Judge Advocate, and that's in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is basically attached to the University of Virginia Law School. So you spend about 10 weeks being there, and you learn about, like I said, being an Army Judge Advocate, and then you spend about 4 to 6 weeks doing kind of what the Major talked about in Marines. You learn a little bit about what the soldiers you will represent, prosecute, and defend, about what their lives are like. So you spend about 4 to 6 weeks. It's not an officer candidate school, so it's not the same thing that like the infantry officers go through or the field artillery officers go through. It's made specifically for the lawyers, so I guess it's likely toned down a little bit. But you still fire weapons and do certain things just so you can learn the life of the people you will be later representing. So in the application process, though, I think that, again, being diverse in the application is great. Being able to hold a conversation in the interview is great. And then the Army requires a personal statement. Don't treat that like you're applying a cover letter to a law firm, because we see that right away. And some of the other people have said, some of the other Judge advocates have said, applying multiple times, even if you get turned down, is great. And one of the reasons why that's great is because sometimes I think the armed forces and the Army want to see who's submitting an Army application amongst 10 others. And the people that are repetitively applying are the people that the Army at least believes are people who truly want to be in the Army above all else. So just because you don't get it the first time, don't let that discourage you from applying again. But I would say that personal statement, make it personal about why you want to join the armed forces in general. Why is the Army or any force interesting to you? Not just your typical cover letter that's like, hey, I work in the DA's office and I think that my skills will be perfect for you. Like the same cover letters that I see across the board. I want to know what about the Army or any force is intriguing to you. Why do you want to be in the U.S. Army? So that would be my tip with regard to our application.
The process for getting into the Air Force JAG Corps is very similar to the others that you've heard. We have 3 boards, one in October, one in December, and one in the springtime. I think it's April, but I'm not positive on that third one. The application is all online. So you go online to airforce.com/JAG. You fill it out and you send it in. When you're doing the application, if you haven't applied for bar and character and fitness yet, save all the information because it's basically all the same information that you have to fill out for that stuff. So it's super easy once you've got it all together, either for that already to throw it into the JAG application, or once you do the JAG application, then save it so you don't have to go scrounging for it again. So you have the board. You'll go through the board. Once you schedule once you submit your application, you will then have an interview with the head of a base legal office called a staff judge advocate. As others have said, that interview is really important. After that, it goes up to a board. The board will make a decision. If you get accepted, you get called by the staff judge advocate. If not, you'll get a letter in the mail. Recently, the way that the Air Force has been doing it is if you don't get accepted on your first application, you get automatically re-entered if you want to be for the next board. And then if you are accepted, you will go to what's commissioned officer training, which is currently a 5-week course, but they're talking about making it longer, making it the exact same as every other officer goes through, which would be basic officer training. So that may actually change within a couple of years. But commissioned officer training is a 5-week course at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. You go through a lot of marching drills at first, learn a lot of military bearing, the basic stuff, military history, and then you'll transition into leadership courses and officership courses and team building type exercises. And then after that, you will either go to your base for a couple months like I did, or you'll go straight to the JAG Advocate Staff Officer course, which is, it'll just depend on when they happen. And that is a 9-week course where you learn everything about being a JAG. It's a fire hose of information. You just try to consume as much as you possibly can in a very short period of time. And then after that, you will head off to your base and begin your JAG career. As far as tips go, I just finished sitting in with our staff judge at SJA on several interviews for this past board cycle. And to echo what everyone has already said, the whole person concept is huge. I think the biggest thing that I have seen is you get discounted right away if you can't articulate why you want to do this. It's not just any job. You have to articulate why you want this job. And I will say it's not necessarily bad that if you've applied to the other services, so I don't want people to think you have to pick one and go with it, but it is important to be able to articulate why you want the service you're interviewing with. It's okay if you want to do Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy, and Coast Guard all at the same time. You want to do all of them. If you can articulate a reason why you want to do that one, it's really important. And that personal statement also, to just echo what the captain said, we see a lot that are like cover letters. It's not a cover letter. It is a statement as to why you want to be an officer in that service, and then why you also want to be in the JAG Corps. And that's the important thing. I think you really need to emphasize what it is about officership that draws you, because that's an important portion. We are a corps in the Air Force, so you are most likely to spend most of your time being a JAG, but you are ultimately a line officer, and there are JAGs who are pulled out of the JAG Corps to be a commander or to do other things that are outside the JAG Corps, so it does happen. So that possibility is there, and it's something that you can ask for. So understanding that officership is a big part of it is important. Something that I will say that the Air Force does look for, particularly because you will come straight out of JSOC and start doing trials right away, they want to see that you have some litigation experience if possible, even if that's just, trials in, mock trials in law school, or that you've gone and sat through a couple trials to get used to things. Just show that you've had exposure to it, that you kind of understand the basic concepts of it, so that you can kind of hit the ground running a little bit. And then one of the things that that we will always look at too is just a breadth of different experience, because you're going to have a lot of different things thrown at you right away. So we want to know that you are interested in a lot of different things, and that you have opened yourself up to a lot of different experiences. We have a lot of people that come in and they say, I want to do litigation, that's all I want to do, and that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for someone who wants to do litigation, but wants to do all these other things also. So it is important to have that diversity that everyone else was talking about.
What I would do, tips, if you want to apply for the Marine Corps, is grab your heaviest law books, throw them in your backpack, and you start running out of California. It's funny, but that's the most important thing to get through our interview process, because everyone to become a Marine officer has to go through 10 weeks of officer candidate school, and it's all physical. I mean, there's a lot of academics involved in that 10-week school, but you're not a Marine officer until you successfully graduate from officer candidate school. For law students like yourselves, it's offered only in the summertime. We have boards throughout the year, so you can apply while you're in school, but plan for you to attend the 10-week course in between your first and second year, second or third year. If you've already a third year, it's when you've graduated past the bar. So in those 10 weeks, you will be evaluated by enlisted Marines. The top drill instructors from Paris Island and from MCRD San Diego, they get promoted and they become our hats. They're our drill instructors at OCS. They, as well as officers already at Officer Candidate School, will just watch you. You're in a fishbowl, so you're going to be evaluated for your leadership ability, your physical fitness, and your academics for 10 weeks. You're leading your peers, you're in a squad bay. As much as I love the Marine Corps, OCS was the 10 worst weeks of my life. I hated it, but it has and it serves a purpose. So it's after those 10 weeks, if you successfully make that interview, then you get offered a commission to become a second lieutenant, and then you return to law school, continue on, get your degree, and then you'll serve as a judge advocate after you graduated from law school. So really start hitting the gym. Women, men, do a lot of pull-ups, a lot of dips, build up your upper body, go on large hikes. There's great hills here in the Bay Area, so I would put on up to 40 pounds of weight and just hit at least a 2-3 mile trail, because that's going to prepare you for officer candidate school. That's all I got.
So how about we open it up to questions for all of you?
I have a two-part question, and I apologize, it's only because I'm not as familiar with military structure, but is there a particular length of time that you need to commit to when you first sign in? And then two, do you get the same type of benefits that you would in the military as well?
So for the Navy, it's 4 years, and it's been the fastest 4 years of my life. It went by like that. And in that 4 years, it usually encompasses 2 duty stations. So for me, right after our Naval Justice School, which is in Newport, so all of our training for the JAG Corps is in Newport, Rhode Island. Great in the summer, cold in the winter. But after that training, which is about 15 weeks total, it's broken up. But after that, I went straight to Jacksonville, Florida for my first duty station. After 2 years, I then went to San Diego, California. A Navy plug here, I love the duty stations in the Navy, right? Probably like the Coast Guard, most of them are on the coast, a lot of overseas, great duty stations, at least from what I've seen in the Navy. And so, yes. Now I forgot the question actually.
How long is your contract?
Okay, thank you. So 4 years, and you are a veteran after those 4 years, so you would receive VA benefits just like any other veteran. To retire, it's 20 years like any other service, and then after 20 years you would get the full retirement and things like that. But for the Navy, it's just 4 years, and that's the commitment, and usually encompasses 2 duty stations.
It's the same with the Coast Guard. The direct commission is a 4-year billet, so it's your first 4 years. You may not be changing cross-country duty stations, but you should have at least 2 different ones. It could be local. Like I said, with at least here, especially in California, we have 3 legal offices in the same building. So we have the district, the area, and the legal service command. So you could just literally switch between all the offices. But it'll be 4 years, and then it's the same once you're out. You do have that status. With the Coast Guard, though, because you are on a reserve commission status, if you decide to get out after those 4 years, you resign your commission, but you would still be considered a veteran for all intents and purposes.
Go ahead, Captain.
I couldn't hear the question, but I presume it was what is the commitment, the initial commitment?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the Army is the exact same as the Navy in that it's a 4-year commitment. Obviously, unquestionably, the Navy and the Coast Guard have the fastest locations on average. The Army and the Air Force probably at the bottom tier of, there's some locations that are, I guess I would describe as less desirable. But with that being said, it's a 4-year commitment, and you'll generally go to 2 different locations. In my first 4 years, I spent about 2 years in, actually about a year and a half in a year and a half in Oklahoma, a year in Afghanistan, and then now I'm in Colorado Springs. The way it works in the Army is you actually do have a lot of say. They take your family, if a spouse has a job, or kids are in school, or things like that. The Army does a really, actually tremendous job in trying to work with you on that. But in your first 4 years, you can plan on going to 2 separate locations. Everybody in my class of 100, when I came to the JAG Corps, got a location in their top 5. So you put a list of 10 that you want, and everybody in my class got top 5. Of course, it's the military, and nothing's guaranteed. It's just the Army obviously has, like I said, some less desirable locations depending on who you are and where you'd like to live. But with that being said, Colorado Springs, Europe, the Army has 226 judge advocates in Hawaii. We also have Korea, Germany, Italy, Belgium, and some other places that I guess you would describe as much better places to live. So yeah, 4 years, 2 different places and obviously you can go online and see all the different places the Army is stationed. And they've done a great job in my experience of trying to get people to places where they would prefer to be.
The Air Force is the same way. It's a 4-year initial commitment. You'll spend 2 years each at 2 duty stations in your initial commitment, most likely. In the Air Force, I'm not sure how it works for the other services, but the placement of JAG officers is done by the JAG Corps itself. So you are separate from every other officer in determining where you go, and I know that they really take into account your desires and any special needs. And I would encourage you, if you apply to the Air Force, there's a spot for extra comments that you'll fill out what we call it a dream sheet or whatever, but it basically lists where you want to go. And you can break it down to regions, you can go to state, you can go to specific bases, you can go to different countries, because obviously there are countries throughout Asia and Europe with Air Force bases. And you'll say, you fill this list out, but there's a comments box at the bottom, and you can put anything in there. And they do read those, and they pay attention to those. One of the people that I went to my JSOC class with, he and his fiance were both accepted into the Air Force JAG Corps. They decided on Air Force. She just took the bar and is waiting for her results. He was already in, but they told them that if they both accepted Air Force, they'd keep them at bases near each other. So they're stationed at Hurlburt and Tyndall down in the Florida Panhandle. So they were about a half hour away, and they're at two bases, and those are things that they take into account and they look into. So I would encourage you to absolutely put those things in. I know that other services, I figure this is a good time to talk about it, and I know the Air Force as well. If you decide to go beyond those 2 years, you get $20,000 for additional, or the additional 4 years, $20,000 for additional 2 years, and $40,000 for additional 4 years for a maximum of $60,000 in incentive. And then also in that initial commitment, you can have up to $65,000 of law school loans paid. So there's definitely incentives for going beyond that.
For the Marine Corps, it's an 8-year contract you sign, actually. Of those 8 years, the first 4 are actually active duty, where you're wearing a uniform every day. The remaining 4 is your choice. You can remain on active duty, keep wearing the uniform. That's 1. 2, you can drop and go to the reserves, where you actually will fill out that 8-year contract by joining a local reserve unit. That's what I did. I'm with San Bruno here by the airport. And that's their typical, you hear in the newspaper all the time, you put on the uniform 1 weekend a month, and then 2 weeks out of the summer you're drilling. So that's the reserve aspect of it. And then the third option is just to go to the IRR, the Individual Ready Reserve. There you're just a name on a list. So if we go to war with China, World War III breaks out, and we need all hands back on deck, then we'll pull you out of that IRR status and bring you back to active duty. But if you join the IRR, just as long as you're breathing, you're going to be all right. You just have to call in or sign in to say, hey, I'm alive. And that's it. And that'll fulfill that 8-year contract that you signed when you first started your service. You can always do a few years in the active, beyond the 4, and then drop to the IRR or drop to the reserves. It's very flexible with the Marine Corps. Or some Marines who are in the reserves come back to the active duty. So it gives you some flexibility. If you stay in the reserves, you're building time now to that 20-year commitment or that 20 years of service. So by the end of your 20 years, whether it's part active or part reserve or all active, you'll get a pension for the United States government. So you will rate a monthly payment for the rest of your life until you pass away. So it's a really good benefit to consider. I know a lot of you are young, and a lot of businesses and corporations don't offer pensions anymore, but the United States government still does. So that's something to think of if you're planning long-term in terms of service. And most people, when they join and they do their 4 years, they're not thinking of staying beyond that, but I'm sure the ladies here will go beyond their 4, and most people do, but it just depends. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Can I just add on one thing real quick? The U.S. Army, like I said, it's a 4-year commitment. It's $65,000 towards the student loans. That's paid back in 3 increments over your first 3 years. At the end of 4 years, you're done, you're out, you can get out. If you want to stay on active duty, you can actually either go year by year and then you receive no bonus. So if I wanted to stay for year 5, 6, 7, 8, I can just stay. All I have to do now is give a 6 months notice that I intend to get out. If I just re-upped, however, and signed a new contract for 4 more years, and at the 4-year mark, there's a $60,000 cash bonus. So it's one fee, $60,000 for an additional 4 more years. So I just wanted to clarify the commitment to the Army.
And I think those are different for the different services. I know it is for the Navy. So just go to the different websites and it should have all the information on the bonuses and things like that.
Is there an age cutoff for you to join?
I know
Yes.
there is.
There
I don't
is.
know what it is for the Navy.
30s?
For the Marine Corps, it's, you have to get your commission by your 35th birthday.
It's the same thing with the Air Force. There is a waiver possible, and I've heard of them being granted, but they're really rare. They have to really want you to do that.
The Coast Guard, I believe, is 41. But again, double check that because that was a year or so ago when I did it. So just double check.
Sorry, the Army is you have to be able to serve 20 years in the Army before you hit the age 60, which means 39 is essentially what you is the age limit.
I don't know Navy. I don't know. Probably mid-30s. I don't know. Yeah.
Is there this is for all the branches, is there a way where you can forego the active duty and just go straight into the reserves once you finish law school? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, so for the Navy you can. And we have a lot of JAGs who are on reserve and it could be a full 20 years of reserve, or it's a little bit different. Major, you would probably know in terms of the credit for reserve, in terms of active duty status, so I'll let you speak on that. But we do have a lot of Navy JAG reservists who come and practice when they need to drill, or they actually may get active duty orders every once in a while for like a year here and there during their time as a reservist, so they actually might come back onto active duty at certain points during their reserve career.
For the Marine Corps, you cannot come in as a lawyer, as a judge advocate, straight into the reserves. The Marine Corps wants you to have that day-to-day client, case experience. However, that said, you can come in as a reserve officer, so you can do our entire process, but you'll be something else other than a lawyer. You'll be, an infantry officer, communications officer, public affairs, whatever. So you'll be serving in that capacity as a reservist while you do your legal job Monday through Friday.
Okay.
For the Marine Corps, for the other services, it's different. And then to expand on what Christy said is, if you do any part of your 20 years reserve time, you're not going to get your pension from the United States government until you turn the age 60. Where if you do all 20 active, as soon as you finish that 20th year, you could be, let's say you're 21, 22, and you start, you could be 41, 42, and earning a pension from the United States government. Or younger, depending if you joined enlisted right out of high school. So if you do all 20, you get that money right away. If you do it with part reserve, it's when you turn 60. The difference also in terms of how much money you get. If you do all 20 active duty, I think you get up to 75% of your max salary. Whatever highest rank you were by the time you hit that 20th year or 2030 or whenever you retire. For the reserve side, the max you'll get is 50% of that rank salary. So it's not as much money and it's not immediate, but either way, both is excellent. Especially if you do 20 on the officer side, you'll at least be a lieutenant colonel, 05, officer, 5th rank or grade. And that's a good chunk of change to count on and rely on every month, in addition to whatever else you're doing in life to get money, from Social Security to 401 pension, 401k plans to Roth IRAs. All of that you can lump in that monthly paycheck you get from the U.S. government.
And I'm assuming all of us would probably agree that it would probably be a good idea to do your 4 years active to see if you like it or not, and then go into the reserves. I think that just gives you a good experience. And here's another reason why. During those 4 years, from what I've seen, and feel free to comment otherwise, I'm ahead of my civilian counterparts in terms of experience right now. So what my mentors are telling me right now at the 4-year mark, they're saying, Christy, think about whether or not you want to get out at this point, because 4 years in, you're probably your most marketable to the civilian sector. So I'm ahead of my civilian counterparts right now in terms of experience. The longer I stay in the military, they're going to catch up, right? So at that 4-year mark, I think a lot of JAGs really take a hard look in terms of whether or not they want to stay in or get out, because it's that crucial point where you can really take advantage of your service, that 4 years, on your resume in the civilian sector.
Just on the reserve comment, I think even for the Coast Guard, you would still have to go through at least the basic Reserve Officer Commission program. So essentially, you're better off doing the Direct Commission Lawyer program, because the officer candidate school portion of it is now basically the same. You're going to do 3 weeks in New London at the Coast Guard Academy, doing the basic officer stuff, and then you will also do a 10-week course with the Navy and the Marine Corps at Naval Justice School in Newport. So there's really no benefit, I think, as far as just going into reserves as a lawyer. I don't think you can do it like that way that you were asking about.
Yeah, the Air Force, you can go straight into the reserves. However, it's very competitive, and I know that it's very, very rare that they pick someone into the reserves straight out of law school. Most people that come into reserves are people who have years of experience, and they are bringing you in for a specific purpose, do a specific type of law, so that when you are on your term of duty, you can come into a base and help them with certain areas. Some, like contract law is huge, or labor law is huge. Those types of areas of law where you might not have the military personnel with the expertise in those areas, so they'll pull the reservist civilians in to do a lot of it, in addition to the civilian attorneys that have positions at the base.
I'd also just like to say there are a lot of Coast Guard legal civilians. Our uniform JAGs, like I said, are under 200. You can double that if you count the civilian legal counterparts. So if being in a uniform isn't something that you are interested in, there are civilian legal careers within, I think, all the services as well. But the Coast Guard, especially because we are such a small service, we're only 40,000 strong. So you kind of have to put that into perspective. And so, you know, if going through all of this stuff isn't necessarily what you want to do, but you're still very heavily interested in that specific service, there are civilian legal careers that you could look at as well.
So
The Army, you can, it's just like the Navy and the Air Force. You absolutely can come right out of law school into the Army Reserves as a judge advocate, and that's what you'll be doing. And I don't know if this is good or bad, but I don't think it's as competitive as the active duty slots or as the Air Force. I think they're actually looking for a reservist in the JAG Corps in the United States Army. One strategy, if you want to be on active duty, that I've seen work for many people who did get picked up for active duty, is they go into the Army Reserves, and then just like some of the others said, while you're in the reserves, it's at 1 weekend a month and then 2 weeks out of the year. But also some of those reservists will pick up and get put on active duty for a year if they want to be, and they'll come work in our office wearing the uniform on active duty for a year. And then during that year, if they do a good job, they get reviews, they get to meet people on active duty, and then they'll apply to be on active duty. And a lot of those reservists get moved over to active duty because it's almost like a good test for us to see, put them on a year of active duty, see how they do, and then they roll over. So if you don't get picked up on active duty, don't rule out going into the reserves, or if you just want to go into the reserves, that's an option in the Army as well.
So we're unfortunately out of time. I want to thank all of you for coming and sharing information with all of us. And I don't know if you can stay like a couple minutes in case anyone has a last minute question, but thank you so much for sharing all your information being here today.